Okay, and welcome back, students who are taking Math for Business and Finance and Math Applications. Um, we're working on the Chapter 16 Summary Practice Test, and we only have problem 6 to go. That last problem, problem 5, took quite a while to get through, okay? And I apologize for that, but hey, when you're working it through, this is, sure, if I'm doing it, I'm just, I could have done that statement in probably 5, maybe 7, 10 minutes, okay, with that information. But, realize that everything I was telling you in that video was what goes through the back of my mind and comes out on the page. It's the reasoning why I'm doing it. I could have just went and just scribbled in a balance sheet there, and you would have no idea as to why I'm doing what I'm doing. So all of that additional explanation, which I already thought of even before I put my pen to the paper, that's what goes through my head. So that's why it took so long. And again, this chapter is like I had said, a very, very dense chapter. So let's get down to number 6, and this one here, again, there's a lot going on here, so it'll take a whole video just for this question. It says, solve from the following facts, rounding to the nearest hundredth. Okay, these are our facts, and we are going to create these ratios. Okay, so without trying to take too long of a time, okay, so our current ratio, remember, is our current assets over our current liabilities. Right? So our current assets in this case is 14,000, and our current liabilities are 20,000. So when I divide one by the other, 14 divided by 20 gives me 0.7. Okay. Yep. So my current ratio is 0.70. Okay. Next up is the asset test ratio. Now remember, the asset test ratio, well, whereas the current ratio is current assets over current liabilities, the asset test ratio takes out things like inventory and prepaid expenses, okay, because they're not as readily convertible to cash like you could with accounts receivable or a marketable security. Cash is cash. Okay, so it's already, it doesn't have to change. Marketable security is something like a stock. Well, all it takes is a push of a button and a transfer, and that can be done in one day to convert the marketable security into a stock. Accounts receivable, yeah, somebody owes you the money. Well, it just takes, for you to be able to call up and say, hey, send me the money, and I need it now. And sure, it might take a day or two or a week to get that money, but it shouldn't take a month. Whereas with inventory, you don't know how long that inventory is going to take in order to be able to sell it in order to get the cash back. I mean, you might even have to reduce the price in order to sell it to get some cash in order to help cover your current liabilities. Okay, so with the current assets, we were kind of like saying, do we have enough in assets to be able to cover our current liabilities? But with the asset test ratio, or the quick ratio as it's also called, can I convert, do I have enough current assets, enough cash right now that I can convert in order to be able to pay off those current liabilities if I had to do it right now, not a month from now. So that's the difference between the two. So if you have current assets of 14,000 and we have inventory, we subtract out 4,000 for the inventory. And do we have prepaid? No, we don't have any prepaid expenses here. Okay, so that all goes over my current liabilities of 20,000. So I have 10,000 over 20,000, and that's 0.5. Okay, so my asset test ratio is 0.50. All right, next up is the average days collection. Okay, average days collection. Okay, remember we're talking about our accounts receivable, because we have to, we're thinking about collecting it, and that is over our net sales divided by 360, right? So remember, in the textbook, don't get confused by the divisors here and how they don't look. I mean, if you're looking at accounts receivable over net sales over 360, it becomes hard to decide, well, what am I supposed to be dividing here? Well, if you're looking at it in this fashion, you start down at the bottom and you work your way up. So you take your net sales and divide it by 360 first, and then whatever answer you get, then you take your accounts receivable and divide it by that answer, okay? But as you saw when I wrote up the formula here, okay, I put the bracket around the net sales over 360 so that I know what I'm supposed, what I should be doing, right? So in this case here, I'm going to take my accounts receivable of 5,000 and I'm going to divide it by, and there's my bracket, net sales of 40,000 over 360. Sorry, 360. So 40,000 divided by 360 gives me, I keep my 5,000 in the numerator, and that gives me 111.11. Okay? And if I take the 5,000 and divide it by 111.11, I end up with 45.00 something. So my average day's collection ends up being 45. Okay. And now asset turnover. Okay. So when I'm thinking about my asset turnover, okay, I have to think, okay, well, what's my sales? Oops, let me write up the formula up here. I'm thinking about my net sales over my total assets. Okay, and notice that the thought just occurred to me. Yes, like I had said in previous videos, you can memorize these formulas, but I'm not memorizing them. I'm understanding the concept and understanding what's trying to be accomplished here, and I'm trying to use that understanding in order to be able to create the formula so that I don't have to be memorizing the formula. For the asset turnover, we're talking about our net sales of 40,000. Oh, and my suggestion is that you try to, I realize we're in the last problem in this chapter, and I keep on saying it again and again and again, but realize that you're going to see these ratios again, okay? You're going to see them in financial accounting again, and you're going to see them again in managerial accounting. What we memorize, unless we constantly go over them over and over and over and over, we're going to have a tendency to forget them. I mean, it's like multiplication tables. Yeah, I know what 9 times 7 is because I've used it so many times throughout the entire course of my life, okay? But, say the concept in math called the order of operations, right? Well, notice I said concept, and the order of operations is I multiply and divide before I add and I subtract, okay? Well, that's a concept. And if I know and I understand that concept, then when I'm come up to a new situation, I'm able to work with that information and come out with whatever I need. If I don't understand that concept and I'm trying to memorize everything, and let's say I memorize net sales over total assets, and I don't understand the concept, what if I was not given this information for net sales? Okay, what if I was given information as, say, gross sales, and I had 60,000, and I had sales returns and allowances of 15,000, and I had sales discount of 5,000. Well, if that's the way my data was presented and I'm memorizing the formula here, I'm not able to find my net sale. So how can I do the formula if I memorize it and I'm just trying to plug and play numbers? I'm trying to mimic it. But by understanding the concept of what a net sale is, if I have these accounts, okay, and I understand the concept, I know that I take these 60,000 and then I subtract the return on allowances, I subtract the discount in order to get 40,000 as my net sale, which is what I now plug into the formula. Okay, but that's all because I understand the concept instead of memorizing it. So with that said, and I know I've said that before, but repetition is the mother of learning, and you're going to see it again in financial accounting and managerial accounting. So be forewarned. And so I have 40,000 as my net sale, and my total assets are 38,000. And so when I divide one from the other, I end up with 1.05. Okay, so my asset turnover is 1.05. And lastly, profit margin on sales. Well, in the previous video, we had said profit margin was the same as net income. Okay, so I have the formula would be net income or profit margin, depending upon how the information is presented to me, and that's going to be over my net sales. Okay, so my net income is 10,100 and my net sales are 40,000. And when I divide one from the other, I end up with 0.25. Okay, so that is 0.25. So with that said, I'm done with this here summary practice test. The only other thing I can tell you about, and it just popped into my head, is that excuse me. Yeah, when you're doing these ratios, it's not just enough to know what the formula for the ratio is. And then I'm not going to, go repeating this, but here we have our current ratio, which is current assets over current liabilities. Well, it's one thing to know what the ratio is and how to arrive at a number. Okay, it's a whole other thing to understand what that number means. Okay, and in the case of the current ratio, okay, so if I have a current ratio of 0.70, okay, well that means I have more in liabilities than I have in assets. Okay, why? Because and you can you will have questions in future subjects where you're going to have to think through a problem, and you can think through it by plugging in numbers. Now you just heard me slow down and kind of like almost mentally take a break here. That's because I was running numbers through my head. I went and said to myself, well, how am I, do I understand what this current ratio means? Well, if I have liabilities of $20,000 that I have to pay, and I have $20,000 of current assets, all right, that gives me a ratio of 1.0. I have just enough to be able to cover the liabilities, and that's a good number. So any number, if this was 40,000, right, instead of 20,000, that means I'd have 2 times as many assets as liabilities. So any number that's 1.0 or above is a good number for me. If the number is 1.0 or below, as in the case here, that's not a good number for me, because why? I don't have enough money to be able to pay off my current liabilities. All right, and that's where now it's like I started saying here, is it's one thing to you're being told these are the ratios we use. You don't have to figure those out. Somebody else smarter than us over a course of time said these are the ratios that we need to pay attention to. Yes, you learned what those formulas are, okay, and you learned how to plug in the numbers in order to be able to do the math in order to arrive at a number. Okay, but what does that number mean? Okay, and that's the thinking through these here ratios to be able to understand what these ratios actually mean. Plug in numbers in order to see the effect. that they have. And once you do that enough times, then you'll be able to then you start to come to an understanding of, what that ratio actually means and whether that's a good or a bad thing. Okay, if you had a company and I just presented you this information as an accountant and you're the owner of the company, well, what does that mean to you? They're just numbers. Okay, unless you know and understand what each one of those ratios represents. Okay, then they become a little bit more meaningful. I'm looking at this current ratio and saying I don't have enough money to be able to pay my current liabilities. Where am I going to? And I need to be able to take corrective action in order to be able to get that money. Okay, and then to go one step beyond that, all right, you can then go and do a trend analysis. Okay, what's my trend? Or a comparison, right? If I have 0.6, 0.5, and 1 here, when doing a comparison, well, here I was great, and then all of a sudden I went down and now I'm starting to go up again, meaning over the periods I'm saving more and more cash, or I'm having access to more current assets in order to cover my liabilities. Okay, so I was in good shape at one point in time, but for whatever reason, I took a hit and I wasn't in good shape, but now I'm able to see that the trend is I'm actually, what I'm, having my managers do is actually beginning to work. If I went to 0.7 and then this next one went down to 0.4, I'm in pretty bad, I'm not doing too well. Okay, so that's just one more step further, and that's why you do these kinds of things. Okay, and to be honest with you, the textbooks, in writing can only, just present the information. They really can't do it justice. You have to actually have someone explain, like I'm doing now, and then do enough of these for yourself in order to be able to get a better understanding. Okay, so with that said, I'm done with the summary practice test and for chapter 16, and we will see you in chapter 17, which is about depreciation. And to be honest with you, after this chapter, which was so dense in concepts and math heavy, chapter 17, there's only really 4 concepts and it's relatively easy. Okay, it'll be a good break from this chapter. All right, so I'll see you then.